You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There are latest things that makes official. Welcome to 16 years, going on 17 years of the Chris Voss Show Podcast. We're one of the oldest podcasts, still running, still performing, and putting out 48 new shows a month. So make sure you refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. There's over 2,600 episodes they can take and binge. And you can just spend the rest of your life listening to the Chris Voss Show Podcast, and you'll learn so much that I don't know what you'll do with it. You'll probably take over the world or something. So anyway, go to for your family friends, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Facebook.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and all the other crazy places that we are on the internet. Today, an amazing young man with us on the show. We're going to be talking about his insights on leadership, his books, etc., etc. Stephen McNicholas. Sorry, I blew it there, Steve. It's Stephen in the StreamYard there, so we'll edit that. Steve McNicholas joins us on the show. We're going to get into it with him and his insights and all the good stuff on the show there. He is a two-time author, keynote speaker, and program facilitator of his leadership success engineering methods and frameworks. After 3 decades in leadership roles across several sectors and from leadership rookie to boardroom executive, he has some firm views and opinions on how leadership is developed and taught. He considers himself more of a leadership practitioner than a so-called guru. With his third book due out for release in early 2026, he's looking to help as many leaders as he can develop the operating system needed for self, team, and performance success. Welcome to the show, Steve. How are you?
I'm delighted to be here, Chris. I'm very, very well. It's late in the evening here in the UK, but I feel wide awake with the chance to talk to the legend that is Chris Voss.
There you go. Well, thank you. And coming across from the pond, as we like to say, over here to Yankeeville in America. Welcome to the show, Steve. Give us .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
It's super simple. There's only one .com for me, and it's my name. So it's Steve McNicholas, all one word, Chris.com. SteveMcNicholas.com. And everything that we're going to perhaps talk about this evening in terms of leadership, books, speaking, and everything else can all be accessed in terms of that website.
There you go. And 2 plugs for you on the books. You've got one book that's entitled Unlocking the Success Code, the 7-step process to succeed in life and work, and also The Recipe for Success. And I think you co-wrote that with Jack Canfield. I believe he's the soup guy, isn't he?
He is, yeah. Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Chicken Soup for the Soul.
He also wrote the book Success Principles as well, which I think has only sold 200 or 300 million copies between you and I, Chris. But so yes, that was a super privilege to be invited to co-author with Jack. That was several years ago, actually. Mm-hmm. And that actually planted the seed for the second book, which is all my own work, and that's what you just referenced just then, the Unlocking the Success Code. So there's a bit of a theme here to the word success in both books, and actually I reference it in the title in the third book that I'm working on at the moment. So clearly you can get a sense that I have a leaning towards helping people succeed.
You have like a theme there going. So I guess failure is out, just success is in.
Absolutely. And I think it's the thing I'm most passionate about is not helping leaders or individuals be average or miss or fail. It's how do you succeed? How do you win in this life? And
there you go.
How do you win in the corporate life?
People seem to find a way to fail on their own, so they need your help to find success. I've always been able to find failure on my own. I'm pretty good at that, evidently. So you have something on your website called Leadership Success Engineering, and it's trademarked. Tell us what that system is, or at least give us an overview of it and how you kind of
Yeah.
approach radical leadership.
As you kindly sort of referenced in the introduction, Chris, I've sort of been trying this leadership thing for about 3 decades now. From the very first start of a rookie, just a teenager, I think I was, through to the boardrooms of private equity and all the pressures that go with that, or venture capitalism. And actually, over those 3 decades, Chris, particularly towards the last several years, I found myself leaning more towards how does leadership success work? I had my own views, and let's be really clear. As many times as I succeeded over the 30 years, I also failed as well. So I have the bumps and the bruises and the scars, and that's why I much prefer the label of a practitioner than a guru. And I think we'd all agree there's no lack or shortage of so-called gurus across the internet on these subjects. But anyway, and in the last couple of years particularly, I've become more and more cognizant, more and more aware, and actually I formed a belief that sort of contradicts lots of leadership development training, I think, out there at the moment. And I think for a second that organizations typically fail because the strategy is wrong, or that there's a lack of talent, or that the market or the product isn't quite what it should be. They of course help, but I actually think I have a firm view that failure or struggle in organizations is often found when the leadership is ineffective, inconsistent, misaligned, and lots of other labels that you can put on it. And I've become more and more sort of firm in the view, and that's what the third book's about, and that's what the accelerator program, and that's what the methodology that you've just kindly referenced for me, success engineering. I believe I don't train leadership. I believe I instill it or install it, almost like an operating system, in that, if you have an Apple phone or an Android phone, they're all very personalized, lots of apps on them, but they all run off the same core operating system. And I'm trying to do that with leadership. I'm trying to say, if you install and sort of firm up and get very, very effective at 6 or 7 core components, then success tends to follow. So I sort of install leadership as opposed to train it. And that's what the engineering methodology is all about, Chris.
Yeah. And, if you don't have good leadership, as you mentioned at your place, it affects people's jobs there and whether or not they stay. In fact, most people tend to leave jobs now with citing poor leadership as their number one reason. And it's a big deal. I mean, you invest in these people, you put in a lot of money to hire, you put a lot of money to train. And if people leave because there's poor leadership or just the vacuum of leadership, really, that costs the company in turnover and talent, quality, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I've had bad leadership places I worked when I was young, and then when I'm out, no, I'm not putting up with this manager. And yet I liked the place and was willing to work there, but the management made it, just miserable.
Well, I actually have a view, and it's something I tend to, when I do a keynote speech or a seminar, I sort of deliberately say this next statement quite early on to sort of provoke the audience. But I actually think leadership enablement is the number one critical enabler in any organization for some of the reasons you've just alluded to. And many sort of organizations in corporate America, in corporate UK, in corporate everywhere across the globe, there is this sort of belief that there is a silver bullet somewhere in the organization or somewhere in the ether that says, well, if we go and find that, then that's going to fix all our cultural problems or our performance problems, all our leadership problems. But actually, I have a real strong view that everything, every metric, every target, every sort of reason why a person leaves an organization, as you just said, you can always track it back to the leadership. And if it's good, bad, or somewhere in between, then that tends to play out in how the organization is performing. But when I suggest that to boardrooms, or when I suggest that to executive teams, there's a natural resistance initially that they don't believe that it's actually all about the leadership. Well, I have a very firm view that I think it is all about the leadership.
It really does come down to the man, what I think some people can refer to as the man on the white horse. It comes down to leadership. The leadership sets the tone for the whole organization. The leader is an example. what methods and morals and ethics and what the company stands for, right?
Totally.
And so all that's represented down through. I mean, if you change leaders, you can see that with presidents of countries. You can see that with corporate leaders. If you put in a leader that either fails to lead or is leading the company one way and behaving in a different way, all the people in the company see that and they go, that guy's full of shit. He claims, he puts out these PR things that, we're going to be this big moral, ethical company and good, but we're laying off people next week for the for this, that, or the other because we just want richer packages. People see all that, and so the person at the top, the person who leads, this is the same for armies, throughout history, generals throughout history. The leadership matters, and I would say, I don't know, it's 90% of the game really in business. Because if you have poor leadership, your company will perform poorly and it will show on the bottom line eventually, maybe not initially, but eventually it will show.
Massively. And there's so many signals, so many indicators in any organization or any business that there's a problem there. It could well be, that execution of programs is stalling. It could be that targets and metrics are being missed. It could be that there's silos in a single organization, that the default is to blame or to avoid accountability, etc. All of these signs and signals exist day in and day out in many, many organizations. And all lead back to what you've just very succinctly summarized, Chris, is that for some reason, whether it's sort of a willingness or an unwillingness to recognize the issue, executive teams seem to think it's something else. And they seem to go down the rabbit holes thinking we will find that something else. When actually I think the problem is staring them right in their face. And often the problem could well be the executive leadership themselves.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's not open up that kind of worms. But so, yes, I think we're both violently agreeing that, leadership and the success and the effectiveness of it in any organization is the primary driver of how that business is going to perform.
Yeah. And we've seen exemplary leaders, Steve Jobs. He kind of had a dark side, but we've seen how he motivated people to buy his product and how to lead the Apple organization and do some crazy things. They were putting so much stuff into the original iPhone that, it was like there was a lot of stuff they put in fax machines and voicemails and typing on the screen and emails and, everything was in that thing. And it was a lot of work to make this tiny device do what so many of these very larger devices were doing at the time. And, you see great leadership when it exemplifies itself. I remember watching the CEO of T-Mobile for a long time. I forget his name. It was a couple of CEOs ago, but, he was a great cheerleader. He was rah-rah going around the company. He inspired people. He had lots of energy and people fed on that worked for him. And it just seemed like he was an exciting guy to work for, fun. And he kind of exemplified that. It's like, we're going to do work, but, this is fun what we're doing. And, we get to do this. And people catch on to that. They either you can either light a flame as a leader, or you can not light a flame, I guess, and just people are just whatever. It's another job. They don't care.
Exactly.
And you lead by example too. People learn from others by example and how they lead. People learn from their parents on how to be parents or have relationships based upon how their parents lead or how their parents have a relationship. And whether you realize or not, that you have influence there. I've had a lot of people in middle management say to me, well, I'm not the CEO, so I can't really think about being a leader. Or, I'm just an employee and I have a management title. I can't think about being a leader. I'm like, no, everyone can be a leader. Yeah. And that's how you stand out and show you can do leadership, is by leading by example. Whether you're a leader or not, people just go, that guy's got leadership qualities. We should promote him.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I engage organizations and they talk to me about the leadership program, Chris, the natural sort of question is, okay, well, what is it about this what is this engineering of leadership that you talk about? And I have sort of 7 sort of core themes that my research and some of the best leaders, not necessarily the famous leaders, and you just mentioned 1 or 2, and we can all think of the names that whenever we get asked, give great leaders, they tend to be in sporting or political or sort of those types of environments. Well, what I was desperate to do when I did my own research on the books is I went and spoke to, I don't know, about 120, 130 leaders across multiple sectors, multiple geographies, but they were leaders that you and I have never heard of. They were just good people in senior roles, performing, succeeding, and had a great reputation as being great leaders. So I went and spoke to them and I started asking them, what is it that you do? Why do your teams run through brick walls for you? Why do you sort of deliver year in, year out? What is it that you do? Now, they might have used different labels and different words, but in essence, Chris, they were all broadly describing the same thing. And it wasn't that they were saying that they are leaders. They were largely saying to me, all right, as I heard it, they practice leadership and they actually operate leadership. And that's where I got the engineering framework, etc. But the main point I'm sort of got from it all, and if there's anything that sort of people who have an interest in leadership or actually do leadership as part of their career and their job, there was 3 anchor points, as I call them, or 3 sort of foundational themes wrapped around those 7 sort of core principles, Chris. And you were just brilliantly sort of leading on to them there. Is that if you can self-lead, if you can team lead, and if you can performance lead, then magic happens. And in many organizations, leaders are very good at 1, perhaps 2 of the 3. But what I try to do with the engineering framework is help them achieve a baseline in all 3. And then what you're actually creating there, you're producing or creating a leader that's got great self-awareness and self-accountability, that's got a way of managing people and leading and inspiring through a team, but has also got that edge and that ability and that capacity to deliver the performance. And you put those 3, the self, the team, and the performance aspects of leadership together. And that's where, I use the expression magic happens, but that's what those 120 odd leaders that I spoke to over several years, that's what they all do brilliantly well.
There you go. I find a lot of leaders, when I talk to them, I'm like, what is your leadership style? What is your toolbox? How would you say that you present yourself in leadership? And a lot of them really don't know. They'll say, I don't know. And I'm like, well, have you given some thought as to how you lead, how you come off as you lead? I mean, we've had some people on the show, they do these CEO surveys where they have like an anonymous survey of all the employees and of course, vice versa. And everyone gets to take and assess each other and find out how they're perceived. And, I can think I'm the greatest leader from a sliced Wonder Bread. But if I'm perceived differently through how I'm communicating, how I'm leading, whether I'm being effective or not, people can have their own opinions of that.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I can think, it's kind of like communication. You think you communicated to somebody something and maybe you weren't quite effective or detailed as you needed to be. And so whatever the key points of your communication got missed, now you have a problem because people don't understand, what you told them to do or instructed them to do. And so, having that self-awareness, I think, is really important. Do you find a lot of leaders are self-aware?
Not anywhere near enough to sort of be what I would call competent and effective in that space. We all have blind spots. We all have aspects of how we're talking about leadership, because that's obviously my main theme. But if we think about when we've been leaders, I've often thought, God, I'm very good at this because, my guys seem to be responding to every communication. But I've since learned that they often used to think, well, Steve's not revealing all the truth. Steve's not being overly candid with us. Steve's being sort of not quite as transparent as we would expect. And yet I'm sat there as the leader, sort of a view of, well, I'm doing this really good. I've got the title, I've got the badge, so I must be good at these elements. And actually, self-awareness, it's why it's the first of the 3, because I don't think you can truly effectively lead others until you actually have got a sense of competence and effectiveness at leading yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's when's your ego speaking versus when is your heart and your soul speaking. It's things like that, Chris. So it's a long answer to a very simple question. Nowhere near as many leaders as we should, and as I believe should, have an awareness of themselves, let alone when they get onto how they lead their teams and their performance. So no, it's a glaring gap. And those leaders that do put some investment and effort in that can really be seen to make a massive difference.
There you go. And yeah, being self-aware is really important. How am I coming across? Am I communicating effectively? A lot of people get thrown into leadership. I don't know what your opinion is on this, so I'll cede some thoughts. But it seems like a lot of people get thrown into leadership. And sometimes they're not qualified to do what they do. Sometimes they're not trained. I remember when I got thrown into management, there was a lot of management training. It was just like, yeah, here's your new title, have fun with that, and enjoy working all the time. And there's not really a lot of leadership training or confident leadership training, I guess you can go through, other than hiring people like yourself, and books and training and seminars, I suppose. But a lot of people don't go through that. And so they just kind of go, well, they thought I had some leadership ability, so I'll just wing it.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
I see it everywhere. And eventually chaos takes over. And that's never really down to the sort of individual leader themselves, because for the reasons you've just said, they've been put in a position without the support and the enablement and what I would call the operating system to have half a chance of succeeding. Usually we both know it. People get promoted into leadership because they were good at the day job, and then they were suddenly put in charge of the people doing the day job with the belief that leadership should come quite naturally because they were good at whatever that day job was. But actually what tends to happen is those individuals, they get almost sheep dipped through a series of events, through a series of sort of workshops or conferences or whatever other labels we want to put on them, Chris. But none of them actually it's almost like a theater. They go to a workshop on culture, they sit and get preached to, and then the organizations sit back and think, well, we've now enabled our leaders to be sort of culturally more effective. But actually, culture and any topic, you only become good at it. You only really grow at it when you actually get the chance to practice it, when you get the chance to do it. And actually, that's one of the biggest glaring gaps of new leaders is if they're lucky, they might go on a training program. But I'm going to sort of call that out again, Chris. You don't train leadership. You have to instill it, install it, allow it to grow, allow people to practice, allow people to learn. And from that, they'll make mistakes, but they'll become sort of operationally effective. And that's what I get very frustrated. Throughout my career, I must have gone to hundreds and hundreds of leadership training events. Did I think any of them made a difference to my effectiveness when I look back? No, not really. I gathered a lot of materials and I've got a lot of folders and a lot of books on my shelves. I've got very good self-esteem, but I probably haven't got particularly good self-esteem. So that's my take on that. We need to do much, much more to help the new leaders coming into the role.
Yeah. I mean, I started studying leadership when I was just coming out of high school. I knew I wanted to be a CEO of a major company someday, or at least one of my own, which I did multiple times. But I knew I needed to prepare for it. And so I started reading, it was Harvard Business Review. I would get the courses from Harvard Business Review, and I get the magazine. I think it was quarterly back then. I think it's still quarterly. But I would read and consume everything I could on leadership, between Peter Drucker and all the other great authors that were out there. I studied to try and become a leader, to practice leadership, to become good. And I don't think a lot of people go through that process. That was my college, really, I gave myself my own kind of MBA, studying leadership, how to run companies, the aspects of companies I need to run and everything else. And it prepared me to, eventually be my own CEO and run my own companies. And while I didn't do it perfectly or well, I did the best I could, and I'm constantly learning. To this day, I don't consider myself a great leader or good leader. I think I'm okay. But I'm
I
constantly
think you're better than
working.
you think you are, Chris.
Well, I try to keep myself grounded and remind myself that there's still lots of room to grow. And sometimes you don't perform in the best moments. Sometimes, whether it's under stress or duress, you're tired. Sometimes you can bark at somebody the wrong way, and you're just like, man, I didn't get enough sleep and wasn't in the right place. Sometimes you still don't communicate effectively. You communicate in shorthand. You know what you're talking about, but no one else does.
Hey, yeah, but that's back to the self-awareness point.
Yeah.
You recognize when you did that, and you knew instinctively something spoke to you of, I was a bit crabby today, or that email probably was written in the wrong tonality. And I suspect, Chris, the natural reaction is then to either apologize or to go and have a chat. Now, that's what I mean by self-awareness. That's that radar. That's that sixth sense that too many leaders haven't even switched it on. And that's the recognition where, the best leaders would know when they've made mistakes. We all make mistakes. In 30 years of leadership, goodness me, I got many, many things wrong. But I also do recall lots and lots of times of going to say sorry when I got it wrong. And I think that's why lots and lots of people stayed loyal to me, and we went on and had some great successes.
There you go.
And I think it comes from that self-awareness point.
And I think people see that self-awareness. They see when, like I say, they see when a leader apologizes, or when he goes, hey, we got this wrong. When he's trying to cover it over with BS and PR and stuff, people see the bullshit and they go, yeah, you're full of shit. But people will trust and follow somebody that they believe can be a good judge. I think of it as being a good judge, being a good character. And if you're honest with them and say, hey, I know we fucked up, they go, okay, he knows he fucked up. We don't have to sit here and go, you fucked up. He knows. So, and he's fixing it and making the steps to make it happen, or he did fix it. People like that. Let's talk about some of the offerings you have on your website. I notice there's some programs here and some speaking stuff you do, some downloadable materials and call books people can do. Tell us about some of those offerings people can take advantage of working with you.
Oh, well, that's very kind, Chris. Yeah, there's two main offerings in terms of how I try and help organizations. You've alluded to both of them, but I'm going to take the opportunity to remind everybody that I do two main things in terms of leadership success engineering, Chris. If I get the chance to stand on a stage and talk to an audience, then I think there are several keynotes and several sort of provocative, energizing, and sort of interactive talks that I give to get this sort of thinking into the audience's mind. And that is something I've spoke all over the world. I've been very, very lucky to have been invited to stand on stages in Europe, in the US, and obviously the UK, my homeland. And what typically then tends to happen, maybe that's on the quality of the speech, is that people will then approach me afterwards and say, what is it that you actually do for leadership in organizations? And that's the second part of the proposition or the offering of the business, Chris. That's when I have a very sort of long title leadership program called the Accelerator 100. And that effectively is the leadership engineering program, but we deliver it over 100 days. And one of the other reasons why I'm particularly proud and actually different from almost 99% of leadership development that I come across is I spend more time on implementation and execution than I do in the classroom. The classroom is very important. Don't get me wrong. It's important that delegates understand the theory and the frameworks, and we get the chance to discuss and dissect and reflect. But actually, that's 40% of the program. The other 60% is when they go away and implement it. And I sit there at moments in that 100 days and I sign off and I validate and I challenge and I hold them to account. And that's when the real return on investment, that's when the real the return growth actually occurs. Because sat in a classroom talking theory, it's a start. But until they actually sit in front of their own teams and apply this sort of operating system or engineering framework, then they don't really grow. And it's a brilliant program. We've had numerous successes. Many organizations have seen real success, and have actually come to me with underachieving, underperforming teams. And I'm delighted to say once the methodology has been implemented, they've seen a fantastic turnaround. So if I'm not in a classroom, then I tend to be on a stage, Chris. And if I'm not doing either of those, then I'm working on the third book.
Ah, there you go. And do you have an anticipated date for the third book?
Yes, the publishers are pushing me daily. But anyway, the first manuscript was delivered about a month ago. So I hope it's on the bookshelves on Amazon and in bookstores by March of 2026. So the clock is ticking, but that's the deadline that they've set. They're going to hold me to.
There you go. Well, you got sometimes we do our best work when we have a gun to our head.
Yeah, not hopefully metaphorically, but I agree.
There you go. So anything more we want to promote or plug out to people or tell them how they can onboard with you, reach out to you, and get involved with you?
Not particularly, Chris. I think we said earlier on, I'll say it again, www.stevemcnicholas.com. That's my website where anything and everything that I sort of talk about and I can help organizations with leadership engineering, anything is accessed there. The speaking site, multiple downloads, brochures, etc., and PDF copies of the books are all available for people to go and access, and I wish them well if they wish to.
There you go. Well, that's good. That's good data and information, and people can also order up your books there, so they can take advantage of your books, read more about what goes on with your stuff, and all that good stuff. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Steve. We really appreciate it. My pleasure, Chris. It's been a delight and lovely to talk to you. Thank you. And thanks, Jonas, for tuning in. Check out Stephen and his website and his books. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Facebook.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.